So Minji, the format's 40 minutes of presentation, 10 minutes of Q&A. Okay.
Yep.
And
Yep.
then 10 minutes to move. So, okay. And I'll keep an eye on the chat for you. And
Sounds good.
all righty.
Just so you know, you have permissions to let people in from the waiting room, and I won't be able to watch the list starting now, just so that you know.
How do I find the waiting room?
So at the bottom, there'll be the buttons with the participants.
Uh-huh.
If you go ahead and click on that, it'll show up, and then above participants, when someone's in the waiting room, if you like hover over them, there'll be an admit button.
All right. Thank you. I did not
Yep.
know that.
No worries. McKenna, I also gave you co-host so you can let people in too.
Okay. Thanks, McKenna.
Congress gives middle-class homeowners who haven't missed a mortgage payment.
Sorry, my weather decided to announce itself. I should turn everything off. That would be embarrassing. It's 12:30. Should we go ahead and get started, Minji?
Yep.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I think I know everyone almost. My name is Kim Hancock. I'm a member of the Innovations Advisory Team, and today I'll be monitoring time and monitoring the chat as well. This session will be recorded for future use. So it's my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Dr. Minji Sohn, Associate Professor of Pharmaceutical Sciences. And today she's going to talk to us about her research tracking antibiotic use in the ambulatory care setting.
Thank you, Kim. Let me
Thank
share
you.
my screen so that everybody can see my screen. Here you go. So what I have for you guys today, and thank you for joining in. After looking at the agenda of the Hatchet, I realized that a lot of other folks, colleagues are a lot better at making title sound interesting than I did. But thank you for joining, and I'm excited to share what I have prepared for today. So I'm going to be talking about the project that I have been working on with some of the colleagues at the college, which is to help the health systems in Michigan to track their antibiotic use in their outpatient ambulatory setting. And the project name is Collaboration to Harmonize Antimicrobial Registry Measures, in short, CHARM. So we've been calling the whole work, the collaboration work, it's CHARM project. So this is the outline for today. I'm going to be describing the project, and then I have some sample dashboard as a main deliverable of the project to share with you guys. And then I have a little case study, little success story from the health system that we are partnered with to share their stories with us. And then I have some discussion that I'd like to open up with you and share some ideas. Now, this is the last slide. This is going to be the last slide, but I wanted to put it up front so that you can start thinking about some of these questions, and then hopefully we have a really good discussion later on. Feel free to ask me any questions and interrupt me in the middle of the talk. That is totally fine. And if you have any quick thoughts, don't hesitate to ask in the chat or directly talking to me. And then I guess more bigger question that I was hoping to discuss with you is some ideas to expand the project, identifying more partners and some ideas to streamline our work process. And then any feedback you might have for the dashboard will be always appreciated. So with that, this is the background. So as a background of the project, you all probably know that the emerging drug-resistant bacteria is in large part contributed to the inappropriate or unnecessary use of antibiotics. And in fact, some well-known researchers have identified that about half of the outpatient antibiotic prescribing is potentially inappropriate, and about a third of them are even unnecessary. So with these concerns, there has been some effort in the nationwide try to address this problem. And one of the efforts was with the accrediting body of most of the health systems in the US. So starting in January 2020, it's been about a year. The Joint Commission, which is the accrediting body for most of the health systems in the US, they mandated their health system to address data tracking and use. And it's, I think, very similar to what we went through with the HLC accreditation process. They want us to show how we are using the data, as an evidence to start initiative and make improvement in what we are doing. So similar kind of effort is done in the health system setting as well. So that's one of the things that health systems had to really address when they are going through the Joint Commission accreditation process. So that's where our project comes in, our CHARM project comes in. We are providing our expertise to help the health system to track their data and be able to use the data to make decisions for their care. So what is CHARM? CHARM stands for Collaboration to Harmonize Antimicrobial Registry Measures. And basically what we do in here is we develop partnership with health systems in Michigan, and we help them analyze and summarize their EHR data, antimicrobial prescribing data, for the purpose of their antimicrobial stewardship effort. So AMS is a widely used acronym in this area. I'll be using it throughout the presentation. It stands for antimicrobial stewardship. And most of the health systems have a designated champion, mostly a clinician with the ID, infectious disease background, who is leading this effort for their system. So to describe how this collaboration partnership process works, so we identify some clinics and AMS champions who might be interested in working with us with this project. So we have initial meeting. In that meeting, we show some of the sample dashboard, how the antibiotic prescribing trend report may look like, and then see if that kind of dashboard would help the clinic in their AMS effort. if they are interested in moving forward, then we go with the next step, which is to have the data use agreement to be established, to be able to properly transfer their EHR, electronic health records data, to FERIS. After this DUA is established between the health system and the FERIS, then I start working with the IT staff of the health system. So these IT staff would be in charge in maintaining and storing the EHR data for the health system, so they know the ins and outs of the data. So I work directly with the IT person to extract the appropriate data field. And those are like historical extract. It's not real-time transfer. So we look at about a year before, or 3 months before, or 6 months before at a time. So we kind of look at the historical data at some chunk on a regular basis. So to transfer data, what I have been doing is to create this OneDrive for Business folder within the FERIS network, and then provide the access to the IT person who actually pull the data. And once they pull the data, they simply upload the data to the FERIS OneDrive for Business folder. Throughout this pulling and transfer data pooling process, it is very important to include the clinician member, those AMS champions from the health system, because there's always some data fields that's not as straightforward. Like drug allergy information was an example, or renal function data was another example that we needed to loop in the clinician member and their thoughts into this process. Now, once the data is transferred to FERIS, then I work with the group of co-investigators and students here to develop dashboard. So we look into the data elements and then see what would be the most useful information for the clinic. And once the dashboard draft is developed, then I share it back to the health system and ask for their feedback and see if there's any additional revision or tweaks to be made. Now, once this dashboard is made, then after then, those newer data as we move forward, as we have more data to be collected, then after then I receive the new data and then simply feed into the dashboard. It takes really 2 seconds to reflect the newer data, and it has been very convenient for that purpose in terms of updating data with the newer data as they come in. So that's really the brief description of the project, but I can't wait to show you the sample dashboard. So this is, again, the deliverable of the project. We make this interactive dashboard and share it with the health system for their use. And I had it pull out in another screen. Are you able to see this screen as well? Okay, thank you. So this is the sample dashboard that I have been sharing when we have the initial meeting. So you can see the disclaimer that this was created for the demonstration purposes only, and it does not reflect accurate usage or some specific clinic. It's not that, it's just totally for the demonstration purposes. But it will look something like this one for each health system. So it has several pages, but the first page is really to describe the trend. There's no assessment or whatsoever in here. It's really to simply describe the antibiotic utilization prescribing trend for that health system. So you can see some of the filter elements in here. You can see per year. You can specify the clinic. So for the health system, they have multiple locations throughout the Michigan, right? They have multiple different ambulatory clinics within the health system. So you can they can see per clinic trend by using this filter. And then in addition to that, I put this location map in here so that they can look at the general geographic comparison in this way. The whole page is highly interactive. So if you click any area, even if it's not a filter area, it will use as a filter. So for example, if I click a specific area in the map, then it's going to filter the entire page to show the area specific trend. And then we usually use this universal indicator so that it allows the clinicians to compare between different clinics that has different population volume. So what we've been using is the number of antibiotic visit per 1,000 outpatient visits, and then number of antibiotic patients per 1,000 patients. What we mean by the number of antibiotic visits is that any outpatient visit that results in at least one antibiotic prescriptions. That's what we define as antibiotic visits. Antibiotic patients are any outpatient patient who receive at least one antibiotic prescriptions. So we had this encounter level indicator and then the patient level indicator for the first measure to be seen. And then you can see it per for the time series, for the time trend. We have it per month, per quarter, per year. So what you're seeing is a default option is per month trend. So when you hover over, you can see that it's for the October 2019, that's the number of visits that we are looking at. And then as you go to the next month, it changes to reflect that month specific trend. In this graph, just like any other visual, it can work as a filter. So if you click a specific data point, it's going to filter the entire page to show the month specific trend. You can actually change the time frame from month to quarter or the year. So if you click this area, you can drill up to the quarterly change. So instead of looking at monthly, you can now see the quarter one of 2020 and so forth. And then you can even do kind of year trend in that way. I have some demographic information for patients who are receiving antibiotic prescriptions, but these two tables would be probably most informative to the clinicians reviewing this dashboard. So we have diagnosis accompanying the antibiotic prescriptions, and also the antibiotics ordered based on the frequency of that being seen in this particular health system. So if I click sinusitis, it's going to filter the other page, the other table to show what's the most frequently used antibiotics that for the patient who comes to the clinic with the sinusitis diagnosis. Same thing with the urinary tract infection. If I click that indication, it's going to update the table to show now nitrofurantoin is the most commonly prescribed agent for patients coming with the UTI diagnosis. It works in the other way as well. So if I click azithromycin, the most commonly prescribed drug in this system, respiratory problems and sinusitis, bronchitis are the top 3 indications that patients come when they receive the azithromycin prescription. Now, I have one more thing about the diagnosis. Now, a lot of you probably know about the diagnosis code, or have heard about the code that's being used in health systems. Nowadays, all the health systems, most of them, they use ICD-10 code, and ICD-10 code can be very, very specific. So you see the urinary tract infection, but it's, in addition to having just urinary tract infection codes, there will be some more detailed follow-up codes to indicate some of the specific details of the condition. But when it comes to summarizing the overall trend, we somehow make it a little bit bigger category to be able to see the overall trend. So we have to group some of the ICD codes to be in a little bit more higher level. So urinary tract infection will have a number of ICD-10 codes that comprise this urinary tract infection diagnosis category. But as a clinician, for the clinicians who are reviewing the dashboard, they might want to see what really was considered as UTI, what was considered as respiratory problems, right? So we wanted to create that kind of drill through per diagnosis category. So if I click the right click and then go to the diagnosis drill through, it will lead us to another page that really looks into the details of diagnosis. So for the UTI diagnosis group, these are the actual ICD codes from the EHR data that we considered as UTI diagnosis. So you can see different names in here: cystitis and urinary tract infection, cystitis with hematuria and without hematuria. So you can see the different categories exist there. And you can further summarize per diagnosis code in this page. So if I click UTI, nitrofurantoin and Bactrim seems to be the top agents. But if we look into another category, acute sinusitis with or without hematuria, cephalexin becomes the most commonly used agent for that specific diagnosis code. So we had this drill through option built in for this diagnosis. So that was the first page to describe the overall antibiotic use. Now the rest of the dashboard, we try to make some attempt to make an assessment of the appropriateness of the prescription. And the way that we did it is to utilize the existing practice guidelines and FDA approval information, and we compare each prescription to those recommended guidelines and see if it conforms with that FDA approval information or practice guideline information. So that's the method that we are going to be using in this dashboard. When it comes to determining this concordance with guideline or FDA approval, there are always two steps or two layers to this one. First one is whether the patient is receiving the drug, the choice of the drug that's concordant with the guideline, whether the use of a specific drug is recommended for that particular indication. Another one more step from there is if the patient received the right drug, if the patient is receiving the appropriate drug, are they receiving at the right dosing amount? So there will be kind of two layers to this type of assessment. Now, this page that you're looking at right now is the drug choice part. Are the patients receiving drug that's concordant with the guidelines and FDA approval information? So keep that in mind. We're not looking at dosing at this page. I have some filters in here. We can look at the page per year, per age group, and then per clinic. And then these are the indications that are frequently being seen in ambulatory care setting. And we have this practice guideline information as a reference table. So we know the guideline information for these selected indications, and these are the indications that we are going to be using to determine this concordance with the guideline with respect to drug choice. So overall, in all of these indications, the average concordant drug choice, concordant drug choice was 73% of the time. So patients coming to the clinic with these type of indications, 73% of the time, 73% of the time, they are receiving the drug, the right drug that's recommended in guidelines or FDA. But as you go into specific indication, it will fluctuate. So for example, cellulitis, a lot more commonly, patients receive the drug concordant with the guideline. But when it goes to group A streptococci, it becomes about 79%, and it changes as you choose a specific indication. It becomes the indication-specific trend. You can see it per trend, and then you can look it up per location of the clinic. So you can see the proportion is slightly different between the clinic locations. Some locations seem to have more commonly having discordant drug choices than on other clinic locations. So that's shown in here. And then there's some provider type differences in here. These are showing the top 5 most commonly prescribed antibiotic agent. And it would be probably more useful to click a specific indication and see how it changes for the top 5 agents that's being prescribed per provider type. The last visual is called the tree map figure. You might not have heard about this one, but it's effective to show multi-level trend. So you can see this kind of blue shaded area. These are the drugs that we consider as concordant drug agent. And then this orange colored shaded area shows the discordant drug choices. Among the drug choices that we consider concordant with the practice guidelines, nitrofurantoin, sulfamethoxazole, these are Bactrim. So Bactrim is another commonly used agent, followed by ciprofloxacin. And as you hover over, you can see the reference as well. So guideline recommended, IDSA had the recommendation to use ciprofloxacin for the UTI, and then it's also approved by the FDA, same thing for the nitrofurantoin. And for Bactrim, it's not approved by the FDA, but it's recommended by the practice guidelines. So we consider that as concordant drug choice. But as you go into the right side, cephalexin was not recommended nor FDA approved. And then some other agents that show up in here that's frequently used, but do not have that reference recommendation. So this page was about the drug choice concordance. Now the next page is then for those drugs that we consider as concordant with the guideline, are they being prescribed at the right dosing amount? So that's the next page. So concordance with the guideline with respect to dosing. Now, when it comes to dosing, it can be a little bit more complex because there's not a single number that may represent the overall dosing amount. Because if you think about it, there's a unit dose that the patient is asked to take per administration. And then there's a frequency element to it, right? Like twice a day or 3 times a day or once a day. And also there's a duration. How many days are you supposed to take the prescription drug? So at least 3 elements has to be considered if we are looking into assessing the dosing amount. So the methods that we have been using to streamline or summarize those, potentially very complex assessment is this method in the yellow box in here. We keep that in here just in case people forget when they look at the page. And it's always a good reminder to show what kind of methodology that we used for this page. So our approach is to basically create single number by multiplying these 3 elements. So unit dosing amount, antibiotic dosing in milligram, multiplied by frequency, how many times per day, and the number of days, the duration. And this will create prescribed therapeutic regimen, which is to represent the overall exposure amount for the patient given the prescription. We use the same methodology to create a similar number from the recommended regimen, so recommended therapeutic regimen, RTR. Usually this recommendation comes in range. So we get to calculate the minimum recommended range, recommended amount, and then maximum recommended amount. And then dosing is determined as concordant if PTR falls within this RTR range. So keep that in mind. That's the method that we have been using. And knowing that, we found that of all the concordant drug choices, on average, 57% of the time, patients receive the right dosing amount. But as you can imagine it will fluctuate between indications. So if I click abscess, it will be a little bit different, 65%. If I click urinary tract infection, it's just a half of the time. And then for this visual, the last one, we can look at the proportion of concordant dosing and discordant dosing per drug agent. So you can see that for UTI, nitrofurantoin, most of the time they seem to be used at the concordant dosing level, but then as you go into Bactrim or ciprofloxacin, you can see a lot more higher dose being used in patients with the UTI. Now from this page, we got some very interesting questions from the clinicians, and they started asking questions about, is it then duration driven? Like they have been talking about, like, some patients will receive the drug that's in the right dosing amount per day, but they're receiving prescription to take longer than recommended. You're supposed to take 3 days, but then they receive 7-day prescriptions. So there's some argument about whether these trends of the higher than recommended dosing, is it driven by duration or is it driven by daily dosing amount? So the next question from this page led to the next page of detailing the trend. So it's, again, we're still looking at the dosing concordance, but a little bit more detail. So to get you oriented in this page, the table, the large table that you're seeing, this is our reference table. This is the information that we got from practice guidelines and FDA approval information. So for example, for adult age group for treatment of abscess, these are the drugs that exist as recommended agent, and these are the daily dose at maximum, and then duration, number of days that people are recommended to receive prescription for. And we have some information about where this recommendation came from. And the visual on the bar chart, this is basically from the previous page where we look at this dosing concordance per drug agent. So that's there. And then these two gauge charts will be sort of main information from this page. So I have one gauge chart that summarizes the daily dose from the data, from the EHR data. And then we have the average duration that summarizes the EHR data. So we've been talking about UTI, so I'm going to click UTI, and you can see the page is updated to show the UTI recommendations. So these are the recommended drug agent at the daily dosing amount recommended and the maximum duration recommended. And this is how it works. So to look at this gauge chart, use it better, you have to click this specific drug agent. And you can see that for the prescription of nitrofurantoin for treating UTI, the recommendation is shown as a target kind of threshold. So this 200 milligram is recommended dose, and that actually came from this table. So 200 milligram, that's the recommendation, and we use that as a threshold. And 193 milligram is from the data, actual data from the health system. So for the case of nitrofurantoin, most of the time, on average, patients seems to receive the prescription at the recommended daily dosing amount. When it comes to duration, again, the threshold, this is from the recommendation table, 7-day, that's the recommendation at maximum. And then average days was about 9 days, but you can see that the maximum from the data was about 18 days. So there's probably some outlier driving the trend, but it seems that overall, the daily dose and the duration seems to be not too far away from the recommendation. When it comes to Bactrim, the next drug agent, you can see that the daily dose is really close to the recommendation, but then average duration seems to be close to 7 days as compared to recommended 3 days. So for the Bactrim, we can say that the higher than recommended dosing trend is driven by the duration. not the daily dose. But when we look at the ciprofloxacin, it becomes both daily dose and duration issue. So for the daily dose that people are receiving more than recommended, at the duration longer than recommended. So these two gauge chart is really the main information in this page to even drill down further of what's driving the trend of the dosing amount. The next page is the antibiotic trend summary, specifically to look at the fluoroquinolone. So for those of you who may not be familiar with this area, and I had to learn a lot about this area as well, I learned that fluoroquinolone is a specific therapeutic category class for the antibiotic drug agent. And these, the drugs that fall into this therapeutic class drug category seems to be having some more serious side effect. So if possible, clinicians are recommended to not use fluoroquinolone if there are alternative other choices. So it's one of the areas where we try not to use if it's not that necessary, if I got it right. So a lot of health systems and clinicians have been focusing on reducing unnecessary use of fluoroquinolone drug agents in their AMS effort. So I wanted to create a dedicated page just to look at the fluoroquinolone for that reason. So it is very similar to the first page that we have seen, but you can see the trends by location, by clinic, and these are some of the most commonly occurring diagnoses that is shown for patients receiving this fluoroquinolone agent. And this age group, you can see that as you get older, you're likely to use more intense antibiotic prescription. And the levofloxacin and ciprofloxacin are probably the two most common agents that falls into this fluoroquinolone category. And you can see that per drug agent, how they are being used in this health system. And notice that on these two bottom bar charts where I show the daily dose and then duration, you can see that per agent, you can see which one seems to be used in what duration more often than the other in daily dose. So that's really the dashboard, overall dashboard summary of what our team has been providing to the health system. Just quickly checking on time, making sure that I have on time. I am on time. So we have created this dashboard now about 4 or 5 health systems so far. And one of the health system actually shared their success story with us. So going to the next one, I'd like to talk about a little bit of case study that how they utilize this dashboard to reduce their fluoroquinolone use as part of their AMS effort. So the objective was to track and identify target areas for AMS effort, and their method was to use this CHARM dashboard to review their electronic health record. For the observation, they looked at periods between July 19 to April 2020, and this was done in one health clinic in West Michigan area, and the result is following in the next page. So this is the snapshot of the dashboard that they had. It looks a little bit different from what I have shared, but it was specific to that health system. And what they have found after reviewing their dashboard was that about 5% of time, probably more because they had some unspecified data, but UTI accounted for the second highest indication for their antibiotic prescribing visits. And for those UTI visits, ciprofloxacin, which is the fluoroquinolone agent, was prescribed about 17% of the time. It was considered a little higher than they expected. And you can see that about 70% of those receiving UTI prescriptions they were patients with age 60 years old or older. Now, knowing this trend, they look into the dosing trend, and from UTI diagnosis for the ciprofloxacin, you can see that majority of their prescription fall into this higher dose category for that particular prescription. And they found that the average dose was about 780 milligrams compared to 500 milligrams, which was recommended. So about 73% higher than recommended dosing amount. And also for the duration, while the recommendation was 3 days, but they found that from their data, their duration was on average 7 days. So knowing these, identifying target areas from this dashboard, they quickly got into the action. So investigation took place, and they found that ciprofloxacin prescription in EHR had some default values. So when the prescribers put the prescription information in the EHR, they had some default setting that show up with the ciprofloxacin entry. And it was defaulted to 500 milligram BID twice a day for 7 days. So 7 days was the default setting, and a lot of prescribers were probably just following the default setting for when they were writing ciprofloxacin prescriptions. So some of the actions that they took from the health system side was to remove all the default setting from not only from the ciprofloxacin entry, but from all the antimicrobial prescription entry. And then they had some provider education on some of the UTI conditions about what would be the recommended duration of therapy or daily dose for treating UTI. So, and then we also heard some quotes from the health systems that they were able to easily identify and come up with some of the action items by looking at the CHARM dashboard. And also another thing was that when you are trying to come up with some initiatives and push forward, usually you get some pushback from those who are using the system every day. So for example, physician group or prescriber group may have some pushback when there's some attempt to make changes in the system. But by showing the dashboard snapshot about how the recommendation is compared to their actual practice, they were able to gain the senior leadership from the physician group to push forward with the initiatives. So that was very good story to hear. And then they said it was freaking awesome. So it was really good work for all of us from Paris and from the health system side. I'd like to acknowledge my co-investigators, Mike Klapser, Dean Bennu, and Ben Panifrecht are my colleagues at the College of Pharmacy at Paris, and they have been integral to provide feedback and give me direction about what would be important to consider in the dashboard. And I have a number of students from pharmacy that I am working with right now. They are putting in different process of this entire project, and they have been working, for example, on updating the reference table. They constantly look into the recommendation at FDA to update what's considered recommended practice. So they have been working with me on this project. And then the initial work of this work was supported by Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. But I'd like to move forward with the discussion table. So any questions, if you have any, please let me know. And if you have any ideas for expanding the project or better ideas for identifying potential partners in the Michigan or outside of Michigan, we welcome their idea, and any feedback to improve the dashboard will be appreciated.
I have a question for you, Minji.
Yes.
So this dashboard, is it available to the public online, or is it, do you have restricted access to it?
So the dashboard is, the element of dashboard is, doesn't have any PHI. So it does not need, I guess, strong firewall. That being said, the link to the dashboard is only known to the health system members, but technically that's not, they are not, the dashboard is not behind the firewall, but it's not searchable through Google engine or any other ways. So you have to have the link to see the dashboard.
And can they see other health systems, or can they only see their own?
That's a great question. And that's our next step. So as we have more, identifying more partners, we have bigger data warehouse within Ferris, and that really gives us in health systems the opportunity to benchmark their practice. So one of the two students in here, Carly and Garrett, have been working on is to combine the data from different health systems and create sort of anonymous Michigan statewide kind of trend to be used as a comparison for each health system. So none of the health systems will be known to other health system, but you can still see how others are doing in anonymous fashion.
Okay, that's really, so the quote, I mean, I was just gonna say, Minji, this is awesome. And thank you for sharing this with, I knew you had I hadn't seen the official dashboard. This is super impressive and very, very useful for clinicians to know, have some idea what's happening in their clinic when it comes to prescribing antibiotics. It's educational for them as well. So, no. All right, let's see. So, does anyone else have a question they'd like to ask Minji? Oh, Renee, we heard you for a second.
Oh, it must have muted back again. Sorry. Is there a cost to the health systems for using this dashboard?
That's a great question. So we are not receiving any payments, but depending on the granularity of the health system ones, so sometimes they want to see provider specific trend, and we are able to do it as long as we get the data field for the provider name, but we don't want to make it as a web link platform. So for those more really clinic specific information, we've been using the built-in mechanism that comes with the Microsoft 365, and that is to utilize like pro license to have only authorized the users to view the data. So again, it's not the payment to the Ferris, but it is to use Microsoft, some Microsoft built-in license fee associated mechanism. So it's about $10 per month per member. And if someone has that license, I can securely share the dashboard so that even if someone has a link, if they are not designated viewer, they're not able to see it. Does that make sense?
So what if the health system also has Office 365?
Yes. So the health system will then have to purchase the pro license for their members who will be seeing the dashboard, and they can see the dashboard that's being more detailed. So I can do it. I can do better than this. So for a dashboard that has very, very specific information, then I share it differently for designated person from the health system, and those designated person from health system should have the license purchased through their health system's Microsoft 365 account.
Got it. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's about $10 per month per person.
It's very affordable for them.
Yeah, and usually like AMS champions and ID physicians and pharmacists spend more time looking into those details. So, it comes down to really 5-6 individuals at best who needs to see that detailed dashboard. So recently with another health system that I worked on, I created 2 dashboards, one to show the system-wide trend, and that doesn't really have specific clinic-specific information, like clinic names or provider names. So that's being shared with the link so that anyone with the link can see it. And then I created another dashboard that's being specifically shared with someone who is identified as having the viewing privilege. So we've been kind of making two dashboards at the same time to share it a little bit differently, depending on the detail of the data.
Does anyone else have a question for Dr. Sohn or Minji?
I have another question. Minji, do you have like a canned presentation like to share with health systems, like you said, you know, finding like that ID champion person?
You know, I don't really have the pre-recorded session, but what I can do is to share the link to the sample dashboard so they can kind of click through and then explore those interactions. And I am really more than happy to give the presentation, you know, Zoom meeting setting, or, you know, I am happy to really meet with them if they are interested in looking at some of the elements.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, let me know. I am interested.
Okay.
Minji, have you ever thought of entrepreneurializing this project and marketing it?
I think definitely there has been some discussion about it, but at this point we are really prioritizing establishing partnerships to have more, you know, to show to others. I think at some point it might become a part of like an innovation effort within the college. I don't know that yet, but there has been some discussion about it, definitely.
There are, the reason I asked, there are innovation grants through the SED, the Innovations Committee, and that if you were interested, I could get you that information. You probably already have it.
No, please pass that on to me.
Okay, I'll send you the innovation grant info. All right. Are there any other final questions? If not, thank you, Minji. Very, very impressive presentation. I'm so glad I signed up to.
Thank you all for coming and your attention. Thank you.
Thanks, Minji.
Yeah, thank you. Good
Thank you,
presentation.
Byung.
Yeah, welcome.
Whoa! Okay, I knew there was going to be a zombie apocalypse. I didn't expect it to be this big.
Stop sharing.
Okay. I don't know, McKenna, is there anything else we need to do?
No, I think I'm just gonna stop sharing and then I have to do the next session too, so I'll just let people in as they come.
So we can sign off?
Yep.
All right, thank
you.
you. Thanks, Minji. Great job.
Thank you.